give anything to throw it to the people in the front row. Well, I'm going to stop when you want me to stop. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to come to Jen. This is, I don't know how many times I've spoken to Jen now, but 4 with you. But I don't know if it's actually 4, because, I mean, are you counting Bangkok? Okay. So I was a child once, a long, long time ago. I'm 61 years old. I was Bolivia in the model United Nations. We censored the United States for the war in Vietnam. We made space exploration international. And we made drugs illegal issue instead of a crime. We also created the Third World Bloc before it existed in the real United Nations. Okay, so I have a lot of hats, and they were asking me, what's with the hat? And I've become a cartoon now. So in Holland, which is where most of the support for my work lately in the last few years has come, they made a cartoon out of me. And so when I saw this cartoon, I decided, okay, I get it. That's how they see me. So now I don't have any other clothes, and I just go around as the cartoon character. Okay. So I need to say thank you to a lot of people. Linda Sills has been a good friend. We've known each other in the last few years since I first presented at the, I think, was it the very first Jen? Yeah, the first. Yeah, in Beijing. So that was a while ago. And then Paul, who's kindly brought me. And also, I have to really thank Paul because he brought my computer back to me. And then there's a lot of organizations that have helped me over the years, so I have to thank all those who have supported my research. And of course, to you for listening. Yes, you yourself. So these are some of the organizations that have supported my work over the last few years. Okay, here we go. So this was me about 20 years ago. I didn't have the hat yet, but I was becoming the cartoon. And I'd already spent 15 years as an international journalist. I worked for CBS News and Radio Televisión Italiana, and so I just switched Fernsehen, a big German national broadcaster. And I covered the rise of China from poverty and isolation. I covered the collapse of the Soviet Union. I covered Middle Eastern terrorism, sadly, ongoing story. But in 1995, something happened to me that changed my life. I was asked to go and film the baseline study for the Luz Plateau watershed rehabilitation project in northwest China. It covers parts of 7 different provinces. And looks a little bright. I don't know if there's anything you can do, but anyway. And there's also no sound. I don't quite understand that. But in 1995, when I went there, there's sound. Not too much. But the place was so fundamentally degraded that it was hard to believe that this was the place where the Chinese race began. So this is the place where all of the Chinese largest ethnic group on the planet emerged. And what it looked like was just a desert or a moonscape. Really, you could kind of stand on the top of a mountain and look in all directions. And it really didn't seem like there was any vegetation. There was a little bit, but just very little. And it was extremely dry. You never had to urinate. It was very strange. You'd drink water, all this water, it would just be sucked out of your body. And we became covered with dust. And the people were kind of sad. I got a theory that another reason to have the hat is because when people are hit by the sun, they seem to get slow. And they're not happy, they're not smiling, and they're not talking to each other. And they were living in caves, and they dig them out of the soil. And this is, by the way, a wind-borne sediment, so if you study geology, you can learn about its origins. But this was the poorest place. In China, there were people who couldn't marry, because in China you have to have the ability to support your family to get married, and you couldn't do it. And they were essentially burning all the biomass. So long ago they cut the trees, then they were farming on the hillsides, and then they used goats and sheep until everything was gone. And at the same time, China was becoming wealthy on the East Coast, manufacturing things to sell all over the world. Okay. So this needs sound at full, because I'm not going to talk anymore for a moment. And you're going to watch an excerpt of our film, Hope in a Changing Climate. This was made for Copenhagen, the COP15 5 years ago. Okay. Is it rolling? It's just not doing it. Go backwards, and then go, now go back, and then don't do anything. Just start out back. Oh, you're in trouble. Try once more. Try one. Excuse me for one moment. I'm going to come down there. How long is this? Anyway, all wrong. Oh no, that's a different one. I told you I needed that up here. Okay, well, let me just tell you. No. No, I don't.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break. So we're not only MCs, we're also comedians, as you can tell by our hilarious jokes. So why don't we just say some jokes? Anyone? Yeah, does anybody want to volunteer a joke? Because, we're all working together. Oh, yeah, okay, come on, share some. You can do it. If we can do it, you can do it. Hold it out here, please. Miss Brado, are you out there? Okay. Okay, someone from the school in Panama that was in session 3 that didn't get their video shown up. Okay, perfect.
tell you a joke. So remember this. So there are 4 people on an airplane. The President of the United States is one. Henry Kissinger is another. The third is the Pope. And the fourth is a hippie. So these 4 are on the airplane, and the pilot comes on the public address and says, quickly, look around you, find a parachute, put it on and jump out. The plane is about to crash. And the president immediately takes one and says, I am the President of the United States, I must be saved, puts it on and jumps out. Then Henry Kissinger takes one and he says, I am the smartest man in the world, I must be saved, puts one on and jumps out. And that leaves the Pope and the hippie. And the Pope says, I am old and you are young, my son. Pope's talk about that. You take the last remaining parachute and save yourself. And the hippie says, it's okay, Pope. There are 2 parachutes left. The smart one took my backpack.
One thing that became apparent early on is the connection between damaged environments and human poverty. In many parts of the world, there's been a vicious cycle. Continuous use of the land has led to subsistence agriculture. And generation by generation, this has further degraded the soils. The final question we have to ask is, can this destructive process be reversed? When I first filmed Mr. Tafuya and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results. The effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological land. As a result of its success, the lessons learned from the Loess Plateau rehabilitation are now being applied all over China. But could such projects work elsewhere in less centrally controlled societies, with fewer resources and different soils? Ethiopia, perhaps more than any other country, has come to symbolize the vulnerability of humankind to environmental catastrophe. This is a country whose problems have been increased by war and civil conflict. And now, human-induced climate change is predicted to make matters worse. As on the Loess Plateau, centuries of subsistence farming practices have stripped the land of natural vegetation. The dry gullies bear the scars of flash floods. These gullies are evidence of the enormous power of runoff during the rainy season. Without vegetation cover on the hillsides, when the rains come, the water doesn't soak into the ground, it flows away in a flood. Then it's not available for agriculture during the rest of the year. This leads to drought, and famously for Ethiopia, famine. But just as I've witnessed in China, there is hope that the situation here can be reversed. In just 6 years, Professor Legessa Nagash and local villagers have transformed a severely eroded terrain by planting indigenous trees and plants. Almost miraculously, a clear flowing stream has emerged where once there was a muddy trickle.
How is it that it's possible for you to get the stream to flow throughout the year? It is because of the vegetation cover, which has been regenerating on this mountain. This water is maintained in the landscape because as soon as rain falls on the canopy of this vegetation, that rain then infiltrated gradually into the ground, ending up with this steady flow of this river.
If we were to restore the vast areas of the planet where we humans have degraded the soils, just think what an impact we would have in taking carbon out of the atmosphere. As much as a quarter of the world's land mass has been degraded, and much could be rehabilitated in the way we have seen on the Loess Plateau. And we've only just begun to recognize the real value of natural capital. Surely investing in the recovery of damaged environments is a cost-effective way of solving many of the problems we face today.
What we've seen in China, in Africa, and around the world is that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. If we can transfer the capital, the technology, and empower the local people to restore their own environment, it will have enormous benefits. Restoration can sequester carbon, reduce biodiversity loss, mitigate against flooding, drought, and famine. It can ensure food security for people who are now chronically hungry. Why don't we do this on a global scale?
Turn off the projector now, and can we bring up the house light so I can see who I'm talking to? So we made hope in a changing climate at the time of Copenhagen, the COP15. The COP20 will be held in Lima in December. Now, this means that for 20 years, the countries have been meeting to discuss how to mitigate and adapt to human-induced climate change. And what I have seen in my research and documentation is that we know how to regulate, or how the climate is naturally regulated. It's naturally regulated by the total amounts and percentages of biomass on the earth. And it's regulated by the total amounts and percentages of the organic materials in the soil. These are the processes. The plants respirate. Now I'm in the car, that's nice. But the plants are respirating. And when I started to study this, I realized I don't understand this. And I'm going to have to study. And it's been an interesting time because I'm 61 and I'm still studying. And this actually makes me feel great. And it's every day is a new adventure. And I've been to so many countries, so I highly recommend that you never graduate. Just keep studying forever, because there's much more to learn. What I found is that the more you learn, the more you know you don't know. It's actually, you can do it with a circle. If you look at the circumference of a circle, and everything inside the circle is what you know, and everything outside is what you don't know. The circumference is one size. If you know more, the circle gets bigger, and so the circumference is bigger, and the content is much more. Now, a few years ago, if you asked me, what are you're going to do something in Africa or South America or Australia or Russia, I would say, what? No, I'm not. I'm living in China. I've been in China for 35 years, so I can do that. But now, I've been working all over the world, and some countries have changed their laws to realize that their economic growth is connected to ecological function. And when you understand the difference between ecological function and ecological because a lot of people talk about ecological services, but ecological services are derived from functional systems. And so they are derivatives, but the ecology is the basis, is the source of life. And what I found in my studies is that the Earth, as the best evidence that we have, suggests that the Earth is about 4.567 billion years old, and that it was a molten rock surrounded by poisonous gases. And that over prodigious time, this Earth was completely converted into a garden. And a few tens of thousands of years ago, human beings emerged into this Earth. And it was paradise. Human beings emerged in paradise. This is an important concept because all of the religious teachings of the world tell us that human beings emerged in paradise. And so does evolution. But then human beings sinned, and they were cast out of the garden. And when you look at it from an evolutionary theory, what happened was human beings began to reduce the biodiversity, and then they began to reduce the biomass, and this necessarily reduced the accumulation of organic materials. And all of the things that you're looking at, all of the problems that you are considering, climate change, food insecurity, poverty, disparity, desertification, even toxic pollution, if you consider it, are connected to looking at a certain worldview, a worldview that says that wealth and money are coming from products, from things which are produced, manufactured, and traded. And this has been going on for a long time. But actually, the reality is that all of these products are coming from functional ecosystems. And when we value those products higher than we value the systems that they come from, we've created a perverse incentive to degrade the ecosystem. And when you create a perverse incentive to degrade the ecosystem by saying that these things that you manufacture and degrade are more valuable than that system, then you will have a constant decrease in functionality. And you can see this in the List Plateau in China, but you can see this in every ancient civilization. This is the development trajectory. And the lesson from history is that if you don't learn the lessons of history, you're destined to repeat. So right now, we live, and the other thing that we need to get our mind around is that we're just passing through. You're young, and I'm not, but the lesson is you're not going to be young for very long. I remember being in Bolivia at the Model United Nations Assembly. I've been several times to Bolivia and driven all over the country and filmed it now. I've been to 80 countries around the world. I'm 61 years old. And I know that I'm going to die. And this is an interesting phenomenon. Why are we doing all the things that we're doing? Why are we studying? Why are we doing all these things? We are progressing. If I think about the thoughts of, say, Darwin. Darwin is an interesting person. I think we're on the Darwin street here. And, Darwin is dead. But he was wrestling with some interesting thoughts. And he has brought us further in understanding how the earth formed and how speciation and differentiation took place in living things. But when you study this theory, you realize we are all related to one singular cellular organism that divided. And there is DNA evidence that shows that we are all related to each other. So every human being on the planet is related to every other human being on the planet. If we do something that hurts another human being, we're just hurting ourselves. And we're just passing through. This is a moment in time. But the Earth is 4.567 billion years old. And cosmically, imagine what that is. So we're very small. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when I think I can't do anything, then I'm pretty sure of the outcome. But when I think maybe I can do something, I have no idea what's possible. Am I being told it's over?
No, in fact, we are teaming up. I'm going to announce that I was just in our headquarters, and we came up with a way for you to have your full complement time. The next session will start at finish, and we are combining the global village with the snacks. So you can eat from your global village group, and all is well. So,
She won't tell me. How much time do I have? Well, how much time do I have? He's 25 minutes, and who's right? Okay, you fight it out. But remember that you're related to each other, so if you hurt the other person. Okay, so, you know, now that I've got you here, I want to, you know, I have this opportunity to look at you, and they turn on the lights, and I can see you, and that's nice. And I think it's time for another joke. Okay. All right. So maybe I should tell you that. So. Just trying to think which joke would be really good. Okay. I'll tell you my consultant joke. Do not grow up to be consultants. Okay? So, there was this Mongolian herdsman, and he's sitting in the steppe, and he's hasn't seen anyone in days. He's looking over his flock of sheep. And a white Toyota Land Cruiser drives up. And a man in perfect khaki clothes gets out. And he goes up to the herdsman and he says, "If I can tell you how many sheep you have in your flock, will you give me one?" And he says, "Okay, that sounds fair," and he would like to prolong the interaction because he hasn't seen anybody for several days. And so the man goes back to the Toyota Land Cruiser. He gets out a laptop and a satellite telephone, and he orients the antenna, and he types into the laptop a little bit, and he comes back and says, "You have 347 sheep in your flock." And the herdsman says, "Yeah, you're right." So the guy goes and picks up an animal, puts it in the back of the Toyota Land Cruiser, and then he's about to drive away, and the herdsman says, "Wait a minute, if I can tell you what your job is, will you give me my animal back?" The guy says, "Oh, okay." And so the herdsman says, "You're a consultant." And the guy goes, "Oh." And so he says, "Well, how did you know?" And the herdsman said, "3 things gave you away. You came here without my asking. You told me something that I already know. And you took my dog." when I started looking at ecosystems, I found out that the Earth is fine. It's human beings that are the problem. So there are natural Earth evolutionary trends. There are 3 of them that I track. One is total colonization of the planet by biological life. The second one is differentiation and speciation, leading to infinite potential variety in genetics. And the third is the constant accumulation of organic material as each generation of life dies and gives up its body. These trends are continuous from the beginning of time. And we can interrupt them, but these are like natural laws. If you interrupt these trends, you will pay the consequences. And what you have to understand is that your future will not be determined by the GDP of the countries or any of these other things. Your future and future generations for human beings will be determined by the percentages and total amounts of biomass on Earth and the percentages and total amounts of organic material that accumulates on Earth, and by the biodiversity, because biodiversity is actually a higher level of functionality. And when you look at the economic system that we have today, and I think I mentioned that we've created a perverse incentive to degrade the ecosystem because we've defined economics in a certain way. And when we look at this definition of economics, that when we extract things from the earth, when we use energy, when we manufacture things, and we buy and sell things, we have said that is the basis of wealth. That is the basis of money. Well, who says? Where did this come from? Think about these things. What's the message of history? Not to remember dates, not to just justify behaviors. It's to understand what happened. And what happened was we created a perverse incentive to degrade the ecosystem, and now we've spread this all over the world. So if you look at indigenous people in South America, or you look at indigenous people in Asia, or you look at indigenous people in North America, or in Africa, or anywhere, you realize they weren't poor. They became poor when we said that wealth is measured in money, and that money comes from production and consumption of goods and services. And this economy has never worked. It's basically the only reason that you can get a black number on the balance sheet is because of what are called externalities. So if you make climate change external to the economy, or you make cancer that comes from pollution external to the economy, or you make desertification external to the economy, or you make poverty and disparity external to the economy, or you make biodiversity loss external to the economy, then you can say, I spent this much to manufacture my product, I sold it for this much, and I made money. But if you take any of those things and you put them inside, then there's no possibility that this economy works. Think about that carefully. Because what we're seeing in terms of climate change and other impacts are not accidental. They are the effects. There's a cause and an effect. And we are causing these things. And this is the Lincoln High School, or Lincoln School. So I'll tell you a little story that my mother told me about Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln was talking to a young boy, and he said, if you call a dog's tail a leg, how many legs does that dog have? And the boy said, 5. And Abraham Lincoln said, well, no, you have 4. Because calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. And calling climate change an externality from the economy doesn't make it external. And calling pollution or poverty or biodiversity loss external to the economy do not make it external. They're not. It's not just business. It's personal. And this is really important. This is what is the meaning of life? We need to actually ask that. When we accumulate material things, is the purpose of life at the end of life to own the most stuff? Does that make you a winner? You're not going to take it with you. And these material things that we're looking at do not bring happiness. So if you go to indigenous communities in the middle of the jungle and you look at people, they're quite happy somehow, strangely. But if you meet wealthy people who are rushing to their jobs, commuting to their cubicle, they might not be as happy. And so where is this happiness to be found? What is it that we're trying to do? Can we have a paradigm shift? And if I look at the situation now, I would say it's pretty grim. I heard the video from the founder of the gin on the first day. And he's telling you, you've got to reinvent the banking system. And you've got to reinvent governance. And you've got to do all these things. Well, this is massive societal change. But what's interesting is I've seen massive societal change. China, when I first went there, was one of the poorest countries on earth. It was completely isolated. And now it's like a dominant world power. This all happened in 30 years. When I first was a journalist, I was covering the Soviet Union. It was a Cold War period. The Soviet Union is gone. Nobody even talks about this anymore. These geopolitical events are almost like an illusion. It's a big mistake to think that nothing can change. Actually, the reality is everything will change. Change is inevitable. And so we should understand that, and we should try to manage that. And lately, 20 years ago, I was in China, and I looked at this situation with the pollution that was coming from all the manufacturing. And I thought, what a terrible situation. Somebody should really do something about that. But what I meant was somebody else should do something about that. And, it took me a while to think about that, and I realized I'm not doing anything about this. I can see the pollution, but I'm not doing anything. So that's what motivated me to create the Environmental Education Media Project for China. Because then I could affect that. And we've created a huge network of films that have gone and helped to educate lots of Chinese people about this. And then lately I've been avoiding watching television or reading the newspaper because I see what's going on in Syria and in other in Libya and in Egypt and in the Gaza. And I thought, oh, that's just so horrible. I can't think about it. I don't want to see it. And I started thinking, wait a minute, this is again, I'm not doing anything. I see this situation, and I'm not doing anything. And it looks to me like if I turn on the television that everybody's insane. That here's one group that's where actually young people from all over the world are going to join the rebellion. And they're cutting off heads and they're crazy, I can't understand it. And on the other side is a response to bomb them into the Stone Age, to just absolutely destroy everything. And I know this region somewhat, and there are millions of refugees. And it's a tragedy to see these refugees. It's horrific. And I realized I'm not doing anything about this. And I thought, oh dear, this is not a good thing. It's again, and if I don't do anything, I know the result. Nothing. I will be irrelevant to that situation. But if I do something, what could happen? And so I started to think, I have this idea. It's called Research, Training, and Innovation Centers for Ecological Restoration, that to aggregate all the technologies necessary to make soils, to save seeds, to understand the species richness, species distribution mapping, and to do propagation and large-scale reforestation. And I have some good friends. I have a friend named Jeff Loughton. I don't know if you know who Jeff Loughton is, but he runs the Permaculture Research Institute in Australia. I gave him a call, and I said, hey, Jeff, I think we should do something in Jordan that would help show the people another way of life in that region. And then I called a mutual friend of ours who's Princess Basma El Ali. She's the niece of the former king of Jordan. And she runs the Royal Botanic Garden, where they're saving the indigenous cultivars from the region. And we talked about it, and we said, yeah, let's try to join together in a collaborative way. Let's have a center that isn't just one organization. It's everyone. It's humanity responding in another way to the situation in the Middle East. Can we do this? Can we transform and restore the vegetation cover, the hydrology, the biodiversity, the inspiration? Can we give everybody a job? 50% of the Spanish young people now are unemployed. These are very well-educated young people. And the reason they're unemployed is because we're looking at work and we're saying a job is to get money to buy things. Well, if you're an artist, or you're a scientist, or you're a farmer, then that's not the way you look at it. Work is something that you do because you need to do it. You're compelled to do it. You must do it. And it's nice to be rewarded for your efforts, but it's important to do it. It isn't probably enough just to show up. You need to do something. How am I doing, by the way? I have 9 minutes. I thought you lost a finger or something. All right. I have 9 minutes. So I'm going to have another session. When's my other session? This afternoon. At what time is my other session? At 4:05, we can have a more intimate chat. And I hope that those who want to continue this discussion will come then. And it's a long session, so that's good for me. I think you have to think very carefully right now, because you've joined the global mission here. You're not out playing about. This is serious stuff. you've chosen some serious things, and it's interesting to see young people who will consider these issues. There are many, many adults who are fleeing from this. I didn't want to turn on the television or read the newspaper for a long time, and I realized this war that's going on in the Middle East has been going on longer than the Second World War, longer than the First World War, longer than Vietnam. This is terrible. If we don't do something about this, it's just going to grow. And so, how are we going to do that? Is it, I was thinking, I was recently in South Africa, and it was interesting because Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for I don't exactly know how long, but a very long time. And apartheid, the idea that you institutionalize segregation and inequality between races as a policy of the government, I mean, it's kind of laughable, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it from a philosophical perspective, like, yeah, okay, those people, because of their skin color, they're not as valuable or not as important. And, what? How can you say that? It's philosophically indefensible. And I think where we are now is that how can we pollute the earth? How can we alter the climate? It's morally indefensible. This is a period like the end of slavery, like the end of apartheid. It's not defensible. It's not possible for anybody to take this stage or any stage and say, yes, I love to pollute the oceans and the atmosphere and the soils, but they're doing it. And they're doing it to make money. And that's because we said that money is coming from the derivatives. Well, it's not true. Wealth comes from ecosystem functioning. All life comes from functional ecosystems. This is the basis of life, not the quarterly earnings of a corporation. Life is given to us when we breathe the air, and we are like bivalves. If we're breathing in poisons, we're going to be poisoned. If the soils are poisoned, our food is going to be poisoned, and we'll be poisoned. If the water is poisoned, we'll be poisoned. And so we need to see that it's human beings who are doing this. And we are human beings. And we're all related to each other. So we have to act as a species now, not as individuals, not as nations. We have to act on a planetary scale as a species. And if we don't act quickly, then those who are acting are going to win. And those who are acting, there's several types, but the majority of people on earth are good. But we're not well organized, and we're not well armed in a way. I mean, I would say that nonviolence, besides what Mahatma Gandhi was talking about, what he did, was showing that actually violence is less powerful than nonviolence. If you look now at the United States military, this is, I would say, probably, definitely the most potent military force on the planet right now. Although China is developing and Russia is not gone, and there's a lot of weapons all over the place. The arms people have been manufacturing and spreading all over. That's why you can easily get a weapon anywhere. But what is the main cause of mortality in the U.S. military right now? You know that? You know what it is? It's not combat death. It's suicide. the largest cause of mortality in the U.S. military is suicide. Now, why would that be? I think some of the people who have served in the military have been experiencing some things that they can't live with. And, you know, we have to create a society where people are happy to go to work. And their work doesn't hurt anybody else. It helps. This is what we need to do. And I would say, what I've been seeing is the restoration of ecological function. This is what needs to happen. This is what makes people happy. This is what causes air in the atmosphere. This is what causes the rivers to flow. This is what naturally regulates the climate. And this is what connects us with all life since the beginning of time. Because we're going to give up our bodies and we're going to be part of the earth as well. And so I would say, please, consider what you're doing. Are you going to school so that you can get a degree, so that you can get a job, to make money, to buy stuff? Or are you getting educated so that you can participate in the great work of our time, so that you can lead society to a time of peace, and a time of abundance, and a time of sustainability? So, I heard the founder say, good luck. I think that's a good idea. Good luck to all of you.